breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's get started with a question. Why do leaders feel isolated?
Well, I mean, the short answer tends to come back to the old phrase that it's lonely at the top, right? And leaders we've worked with often feel that isolation because they have just a large and diverse set of responsibilities. And it's not always appropriate to kind of share those burdens or those responsibilities or the anxieties that come with those responsibilities with your staff or your team, right? Like it's the issues that they're dealing with by necessity almost kind of isolate them because it's one of those burdens of leadership that one of your responsibilities is to shield your team from the uncertainties that may be coming at them. I mean, there's always that balance of transparency, but by and large, that's one of the key contributors, right?
Mm.
Um, this entire issue of it being only at the top is why in so much of our work we like to partner with really effective leadership coaches, somebody who can work on building the individual capacity of leadership teams, who can act as a bit of a support system to the leaders while we do our investigation, our develop resources, tools, and do some operational restructuring for stability.
Yeah, and I mean, like what's interesting is when we talk about it being lonely at the top, sometimes, we often work closely with like the executive team, the C-suite, those types of things, right? And we're working with the leadership coaches and stuff like that. That's
Yep.
kind of who they're focused on. But there's even a flavor of this that exists at the middle management as well, because it's when there's isolation in the middle management team where they are not seen as a team themselves. They're
Yeah.
all off in their own things. Like especially when you have a lot of like like site managers and stuff like that, that they're the leader of their kind of like of their site, but they have no one they talk to. They don't really know the other site managers, so they're kind of like on their own isolation pieces. And you're right. That's why when we work with leadership coaches, we should, like I mean, like we work closely with a great coach, Jody Bach, who is excellent at kind of building these kind of like like team dynamics when it comes to kind of the different kind of leadership kind of levels and the C-suite stuff like that. Because because one of the things that we go into is sometimes those teams are not teams; they're just
A
individual.
collection of individuals.
Right. And so one of the like lowest hanging fruit when you're trying to rebuild organizational like resilience and strength and kind of stability is to remove this isolation of leaders, that doesn't need to be there by just connecting them to each other.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing that what that kind of like connected, like ability to for leaders to kind of have someone that they can understand what they're going through. Having a peer to talk to is powerful. And it's something that, again, like when we work with organizations that are experiencing different degrees of instability or they're dealing with kind of like whatever the kind of challenges that we're brought in to kind of help with, one of the like most effective things that we do very, very early on is just connecting those people that are just that have no reason to not to be connected and building some kind of like team dynamic and that kind of connection amongst peers.
Yeah, it builds a bit of a support system. I want to jump in or follow up on what you mentioned around middle managers, because I think that does get missed often when we talk about leadership and isolation and loneliness. I mean, the majority of our conversation will focus on kind of the executive level, but you did bring up a good point there because this also happens when there's a lack of psychological safety,
Hmm.
right? Because it feels like you're almost squished between two It's a rock and a hard place. You've got your team that you're responsible for. And again, it's often not appropriate to share all of those insecurities that are going on because that doesn't really help with team performance and morale. But at the same time, if you don't feel that you have a leader yourself who you can go to, who is responsive and able to coach you through these things, if you have that feeling that, well, if I show any type of like the idea that a question having questions is weakness or not
Mhm.
having all the answers is
Right.
a form of weakness.
Mhm.
So that's that dynamic I think is really important to understand, and that is a tough place for those middle-level managers to find themselves. And
Mhm.
I think what we are talking about here in this episode will be very valuable in that context, as well as the more traditional leadership executive level context.
Yeah. And so again, like focusing on the why do leaders feel isolated, I think this sense of, like you say, they're stuck between that rock and a hard place. They have people that report to them that they can't kind of like it isn't a safe place to have a real
Mhm.
conversation sometimes, right? And if they have manager or if they have their supervisor or whether it's their board or whether it's their if they're in municipal realm, their municipal council, whatever it is, are not people that they can show weakness around, right?
Yep.
Um, so then it does put them in this between a rock and a hard place. But I mean, the thing too is that sometimes early on in careers, people are like, well, no, there has to be a solution for this. I'm a verbal processor. I need to talk this stuff out. And maybe they have reached out to somebody in their personal life, or they did reach out, or they did bring a confidant on, someone that they report to or who reports to them, and they got burnt.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, never again am I talking to anybody. I'll just carry this mountain on my shoulders alone forever because I'm
Yeah.
not getting
And you
hurt.
don't even need to necessarily get burned to get like I mean,
Right.
I've spent a lot of time coaching small business owners.
Yeah.
And one of the like there's an isolation there as well because and not only do you not have your team that you can necessarily confide in, you also don't necessarily have anybody above you or supporting you who you can confide in.
Right.
But also, you oftentimes like family doesn't quite fit that role. They may be extremely supportive of
Mhm.
what you're doing and want you to succeed and want to be a support piece for you, but may not understand what it is that you're going through if they've never gone through it themselves, right?
Mhm.
Like I think like even in our own business, like my wife is the most supportive of what we are doing and behind it 100%.
Right.
But when I start talking about what we actually do, her eyes glaze over, right? Like I find it interesting because I'm a nerd.
Right.
But right, like, but it's no reflection on anything other than incredibly supportive, but different interests, right?
Yeah.
And
And
not
yeah.
necessarily knowing those, I mean, there's lots of reasons why it feels isolating when
Mhm.
you are in these leadership roles or as a business owner.
Yeah. No, and you're right. And I think that that's a really important point. I think that we shouldn't lose this, that business owners have this very much isolation piece too. And because you're right. Like sometimes it's a matter of like I know how to handle a lot of things, but I just want someone that gets me and gets how great this cool thing that happened is. And I go, oh,
Yes.
that's cool, right?
Or understands how frustrating some things can be. Like
Right.
somebody who you can, like just the ability. If you haven't noticed, this podcast is one way that I vent. But
Well,
having that mechanism, right?
yeah.
Having the ability to talk things out. And from a business owner to be able to vent about things that are frustrating you,
Mhm.
or to, but not just talking to a wall, right? To have somebody who kind of gets it.
Well, and I mean the thing too, I mean let's talk about kind of the embarrassment of riches that you and I possess in the fact that you and I formed Roman 3 together and we have each other and
Yeah.
we work with we partner with a lot of other entrepreneurs and again people in this ecosystem that we work in that are running it solo, or they're leading their own teams, but they're the only one at the top. And they've many of them commented how jealous they are that you and I have each other,
Yeah.
because and again, we create a very unique business that does really weird but cool stuff that, we take big swings. And the reason why we're still here and why we're still successful is because largely because we have each other.
Yeah.
So I mean, so we are speaking from stuff is different when you have someone to talk to, when you are not isolated, when you have the term that we like to use is connected resilience.
Yeah.
That somebody gets you someone that can provide, support where you need it, someone that you can just geek out with, someone that can hold you accountable, all those other kind of pieces. Whether it's, again, it being one person is a unicorn. And I think where we're going to go is the problem is a lot of us try to find that one unicorn of who we can talk to. Often it's like a mentor or someone else like that too. And that can be tough because most of the time you're not going to find that perfect person that can be all things that you need. And maybe that's kind of where we want this kind of reflective, kind of like this critical thinking that we want this conversation to evoke in people is going to be around understanding that maybe it's about breaking down the different things that you need. Because the one thing that is really important in leadership roles, again, you and I step into like really complex environments and we see all kinds of different stuff, but the thing that's really tough is finding that balance of vulnerability in your leadership
Mhm.
roles, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to balance some vulnerability about trying to have someone to talk to and share things with, but also like, those who your staff, who reports to you, knowing what you can share with them, knowing who you report to, whether it's the board or the council or whatever it is, knowing that you can talk to them. So this is going to be the thing that I want us to try and like help give some really practical steps to find that balance of vulnerability and to benefit from this connected resilience that
Yeah.
can be a game changer for people.
Yeah, the balance of vulnerability is an interesting question because there's no clear line in the sand that's going to work for every situation.
Hmm.
It is largely a judgment call,
Yeah.
and you're not going to make the right call 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen this in my own work.
Right.
Of you mentioned it. When we step into organizations, we are typically stepping into organizations that are in the midst of some sort of transition, crisis, uh,
Chaos.
chaos, right? And that is very hard on people. And so, I mean, I mentioned it in one of our previous episodes in the last, I don't know, couple months around. I tend to err on the side of communicate early, communicate often. As a tool when I'm working with staff to try to make sure that people are informed. And that is a really effective relational method.
Hmm.
But that also that balance, going down that route, you do run the risk of maybe potentially oversharing or providing
Right.
more information than people may actually need. And
Hmm.
so I don't want to say here's the rule that you use in every situation
Right.
because I don't believe that exists.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a matter of understanding that um, for many people, withholding information, people will fill in the blanks themselves.
Right.
And recognizing when a situation is going to become worse, if people start filling in the blanks themselves, you probably
Mhm.
need to start sharing a bit more information,
Yeah.
right? Like that's kind of how I often try to balance these expectations
Mhm.
around the communication side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talked about that in, I think, it was our last leadership tips episode. It is about finding that balance of vulnerability, knowing when you can share a thought out loud and when you can actually get some feedback without it invoking action or evoking anxiety can be a tough thing. And then we still make mistakes, and again, we kind of do this for a living, so everyone's going to make mistakes doing this.
Yeah. If I make a mistake, you're definitely going to make a mistake.
So,
Or it might just be time for me to be quiet and drink my coffee.
but yeah, I think that again, you and I have been working in this kind of stuff for a long time. So what's cool is that going back pre-Roman 3, when you were working with small businesses and I was working in workforce development, um, I was doing some work around the kind of the psychology um, around the organizational psychology strategies to build psychological capital and training resources to kind of help build more resilient, high functioning employees. And one of the concepts that you and I worked on together was a concept that we called the great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the great, so GR8 was, we think we're clever,
We
was
don't just think we're clever. We are clever.
what was this idea of saying, okay, the antidote for isolation, whether it's at the top or whether it's at the management level or whether it's kind of like, again, high functioning employees or whatever it is this concept that we talk about, which is the connected resilience.
Hmm.
So to have connected resilience, you need to have a support system behind you, some people that you're connected to give you strength. And the great was a concept that we built that was like 8 different roles in your support system that are a sum of parts. When you have all those parts filled, that's what creates the connected resilience. And so it's something that we talked about, a lot when we were, kind of pre-Roman 3 days, and then it's filtered into a lot of the work that we do when we're talking about kind of rebuilding team infrastructure. Is kind of like looking at how can people feel that balance of vulnerability by knowing who they can talk to about what, because kind of the idea was that kind of like I said before, is that you and I are cover a lot of these different kind of like 8 different aspects of the support system for each other, but that's a rarity. Usually, it's more about 1 or 2 people can fill like, or sorry, 5 or 6 people can fill 1 or 2 of these roles,
Yeah.
right? And that's a more robust, more a stronger, more diversified approach to building a support system than trying to find that one unicorn that can be all things to you.
The reason why we are able to fill multiple roles within the great isn't just, well, I mean, we are incredible human beings, but it's not just that element, right? We've worked together for 20 years.
Yeah.
Somebody can fill multiple roles within the great if there is that those shared experiences, right?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
not that this is a unique situation. It's
Mm.
a product of the fact that we have worked together for far too long.
Right. And we, in our career journey, where we started off kind of like, fresh out of school all the way till starting our own business together.
Very parallel
Yeah. Very, very
trajectory.
interwoven. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this idea is that, if you have someone that has that kind of shared experience, that's terrific. And what we're saying is the great does not take away from
No,
that wonderful situation, but that is not the reality for most people out there. Most
it's not the
business.
norm. I just want to make sure that people know that this is achievable.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, but for most business owners, most managers, most leaders, most executives, you're far better off to trying to find, multiple people that can fill 1 or 2 roles within the grade.
Yeah.
So I think so. What I want the rest of this conversation to kind of be about is us talking a little bit about some of the elements of the great. We're not going to be able to go through all 8. We just don't have the time. But let's talk about some of the highlights from the great because ideally too, and this is spoiler alert. We actually are working on developing the great as a program that can support entrepreneurs and kind of like and executives and even middle level managers in their career growth about trying to build this kind of connected resilience to eliminate the isolation and to make it less lonely at the top.
Well, I mean, we see it in every organization that we step into, right? Like
Yeah.
it is pervasive.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that we're like, man, I wish we always say, man, I wish we had that developed already.
And
And
it's
I
like,
mean,
oh yeah, we actually did this like 10 years ago and we just put it on a shelf.
yeah, yeah. So we're in the process of moving this off the shelf and developing this, and we're excited about it. But is something that we feel this is helpful to share with people now. Because there's a
Yeah.
lot I think that you can get from this conversation just by hearing some of these concepts. And again, this critical reflective approach to you thinking about what builds resilience in your own life will be a big part of how this may make some differences for you listening. So let's talk about. So I got four of the eight here, and I want to talk a little bit about those, and then we'll talk about kind of like some of the like other side of the coin, some of the more challenging things that people
Who
feel.
to avoid?
Yeah, what do we
Like,
avoid?
let's just the people who are not going to help you along this journey in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Now the way that we've
And I'm
structured.
sure you actually already know these people.
Yes. Now the way we structured the grade is we have these little cute little archetype names, and then a bit of a definition, and then on the other side we have the opposite of the grade, or what we call the dirty dozen. Those Guess how many of those there are. That also that also have like these kind of like these fun little names and definitions, but they're almost like the ones that if the grade builds resilience, the dirty dozen are what kind of like hinder or take away your resilience. But let's start with the great. So the one that we talked about. So the first one I want to talk about is kind of the one we said. How great is it when someone understands what you do or has that shared knowledge and shared understanding? So
It's
this is
just as excited about what you're doing as you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we call this role the Geek Squad. These are the people who share common interests, common knowledge, common understanding of your work reality.
Yeah.
And these are just those people that, like, again, they're the colleagues that are in a similar field that, like, if something really cool happens that your family and friends at home would not ever get, they're the ones that get it. And they go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And you can just, like, totally kind of geek out or dig into
Yeah.
stuff. Like, we see this with HR. Right? Like again, especially you have an HR background that when we go into an organization and there's an HR professional there, they're usually alone and they've been like isolated for so long, but then they can
Like,
talk to
oh
you.
my Lord, there's somebody who gets it, who I can talk to. Yeah.
It just like they light up when they're like, oh man, like like people make fun of me that talk about SOPs and these kind of policy structures and job hunting. You're like, no, that's awesome. And so just
Yeah.
those kind of like, yeah, you kind of light up when you talk about those geeky little things.
It's such a simple thing. And I mean, I don't think anybody's really going to be that surprised as we go through the list. But what's so effective about the Geek Squad is that they're not just rah, everything is great.
Mm,
If they are people who have a shared knowledge, a shared
right.
understanding, and are interested in the same things that you're interested in, they
Mhm.
are an incredibly effective group for validating or poking holes in new ideas.
Right.
People who you can go to, who respect what you're doing, who understand your perspective, who can give you feedback, who can get excited about the stuff that you are getting excited about, but can also rein you in a little bit because we excitement is wonderful,
Right.
but just excitement over an idea that has not been validated, I've seen
Mm,
far too many times.
right.
And it
Absolutely.
leads to, so having this geek squad who gets it, who
Hmm.
shares your excitement and you have that personal relationship with as part of your support network,
Hmm.
such a great resource to both build you up, but also to keep you somewhat grounded and to make sure that the ideas that you are so excited about are
Hmm.
actually have some basis in reality.
Yeah. So like if you're an entrepreneur and again you move to something that's very, very niche, but are there other people that work within that niche or maybe within the kind of atmosphere of that niche that get enough about what you're trying to do that could actually like you could grab coffee with and just kind of talk about stuff
Yeah.
so you feel like someone else in the world understands what I'm doing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's even just those kind of things. Or if you're an executive, it's a matter of like maybe you rose through the ranks from maybe like the engineering department and you're working with a bunch of people that are great, but maybe they come from finance, they kind of come from kind of the operational pieces, or they kind of come from like HR, but they don't really get the engineering piece. Can you go? Is there someone there that you could actually like almost like itch the engineering scratch?
Yeah.
Scratch the engineering itch. Sorry. If you, yeah,
Itch that scratch.
yeah. If you can add to someone that you could just geek out with, right? And there's real value in that. Just that thing alone. Again, maybe it's not about them necessarily having to rein you in or necessarily having to kind of poke holes, but someone that you can just talk to and kind of
Yeah.
like just like, like not have to try and filter everything, or you can use the jargon and vernacular and, the acronyms that you are always trying to not use because you want to make sure that everyone gets you. Someone that you can just do that with, like, right?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a mentor that you've worked with, somebody who gets it, who understands. Like, it could be a peer, it could be a colleague. If you're in a larger or in a corporate setting, and you've got, you know, colleagues who are at the same level who you can build those relationships, that can be really effective
Yeah.
because they can also understand the context. But it
Mhm.
can also be somebody in a completely different industry from you. All right.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
about finding your tribe, finding your people, the those people that you can just have you can geek out with, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And it can be
that's
someone that reports to you or is a few levels below on the hierarchy of you, but someone that gets it, that you're just, not, you're there as a,
within appropriate context, right? You're not going to share everything with them,
no,
but
no, but
yes,
you're only talking about that shared piece, right?
yes, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's a great one. So if you can find, like I say, James said, find your tribe with that. That can be a great thing to add towards this collective resilience. The next one is what we call tour guides.
Hmm.
Now, these are people who can help guide us through unfamiliar environments. So this is about people that actually have a lot of the different knowledges and skill sets that we don't have. They're almost like the opposite of the Geek Squad, as far as like someone that can help you navigate a lot of things that you want to do. A good example of this is if you're kind of a manager that's about kind of like customer service delivery, or you lead like a front facing department or those kinds of things like that too. And but you might need to talk to someone that can guide you through more of the internal impact of that. Maybe
Yep.
it's like the finance, the CFO can be someone that could say, okay, I have a different skill set than you, but I can help you navigate all the financial ends towards this new project that you're working on, right? Someone that can guide you, having different skill sets and different experiences. This is something that, maybe it's a matter of the someone that you have contact who's part of government regulations that can kind of say, okay, cool. So you want to do this. Let's figure out how you can get to where you want to get to, right? So
Yep.
it's that kind of, again, someone that can give you the advice, point you in the right direction, to help you troubleshoot things that are going to be in your way that you may not know are coming.
And this was a role that I played a lot when I was doing the business coaching, when I was heavily involved in the with small businesses,
Right.
because you may not necessarily have somebody at your disposal or within your network who you can talk about these things to. So it kind of became this, hey, I'm looking at, I want to start exporting to a new market.
Mhm.
What do I need to know? And we kind of work through that together and kind of be able to guide the person through what they need to be considering, what we need to look at, how are we going to approach this, what's our market segment, what's our entry method, all of these different pieces in creating that pathway.
Mhm.
It doesn't always have to be somebody internal or somebody or a peer. Like you can find some great external resources as well.
Yeah.
Part of it is finding that right fit, that for the tour guide, having somebody who can guide you through that unfamiliar process of, maybe you want to take your business to the next level and you're not sure how to grow or what
Mhm.
the right pathway forward is. This is where business networking groups can actually be really effective,
Yeah.
because building that personal relationship with people who have done it before, who have walked the path that you are now starting down, is just such, I mean, I'm going to end up saying this for every single one of them, but it's such a benefit to
Mhm.
have somebody in your network who can act in that role.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I often recommend to internal teams when we're working with organizations is for people in the like payroll department or people in like HR to try to build some type of like rapport or contact with somebody in government. So like payroll and finance, I usually try and get them to have someone that works for the revenue agency, whether it's the CRA or the IRS, that they could actually contact them directly instead of going through the main line.
Hmm.
Same when we're dealing with like, because again, we're working with a number of organizations that are dealing a lot with like immigration. So dealing with people
Yeah.
through Immigration Canada and kind of saying, stop, don't go through the main chat. Try and get a hold of a human and learn the human's name and see if you can get that person's contact and then talk to
And
them. They're
then
usually
talk
very
to them, reach out to them through LinkedIn, try to build some sort of rapport.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idea of trying to build that tour guide that can help you through these unfamiliar territories, because again, this isn't about this is about just having someone that knows parts of the stuff that you don't know, and
Yeah.
again, and about just who can guide you in the right direction. They're not necessarily doing it for you, but they're the ones that can just again point you. They can give you that a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, or a piece of information that you didn't know about, or how stuff really works, kind of behind the scenes. Those kinds of little things. That's really what the tour guide can do. Whether that's a consultant, like you said, like you, whether that's someone that works for government or regulatory bodies, whether that's someone that's internal or it can help you kind of guide stuff, but just who's going to be able to help you through these unfamiliar phases.
And granted, this does require you to know how to actually build a relationship with other people,
Yep.
right? Not just from a transactional standpoint, but how do you build rapport? How do you build trust?
Yeah.
Because it's when you have rapport and trust that people are willing to actually do something for you.
Right.
If you approach everything from a transactional nature, then the question is always, well, okay, if I do this for you, what are you going to do for me?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So relationship is largely what we're talking about here, rapport and trust.
Yeah, well, and that's a fundamental part of the great, but also building any kind of support system is being able to
Yeah.
kind of like relationship management, relationship maintenance is a big part of this. It's about being a human to another human, and looking for again that ability to make that
Yeah.
connection, right? That's really the kind of
Yeah. I just see far too much in the discourse right now that focuses more on transactional.
Well, here's the thing. Let's move on to another one that is a bit more transactional,
Yeah.
which is the one that we call the professionals.
Right.
And this is just that. This is when you bring on someone to be dependent on to provide assistance for a specific purpose and to handle something for you. This is like the example of this in your personal life is like, when your sinks back up, you call a plumber. They're the professional that you come in. You don't necessarily have a personal relationship with them, but there's someone that oh, I always get Jerry. Jerry's great. He does great work.
Oh man, finding a tradesperson who you can trust and rely on,
Yeah.
huge asset.
Yeah. But
Same is true in your business.
absolutely. And that's just it. Like, I mean, the idea of there are, again, like great accountants, having
Yep.
a really good accountant, having a really good lawyer, right? Having, again, a really good insurance broker, having a really good, again, like financial manager or personal finance manager, like those types of things, like having a good HR consultant, again, all these kinds of things, having a good leadership coach. All of these things fall under the professional. Someone that you've done your homework on, maybe you've gotten a bit of a connection or a bit of a referral from, or you've asked people who is really good for these things. I don't
Yeah.
need someone right now. I'm not in a crisis. So,
Yeah.
but who's someone that if I do get to be in a crisis, who's someone that I can talk to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a self-serving way, that we fall under this with a lot of the work that we do. A lot of the advisor work that we do is, we are the professionals. When someone needs help, kind of navigating something or building or having a diagnostic being done, we'll go in and do that.
Operational stability, growth,
Absolutely. Yeah,
merger acquisition.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We go in for a finite purpose, and it's a very transactional relationship. We go in to
Yeah.
do the job, but it's not just. But the thing about the professional isn't about anybody. It's about finding somebody that you
That you
know
can
can
rely on.
right, and you can trust the quality of their work,
Yeah.
and doing that before you're in crisis mode. Because when you hire someone last minute, when you're just looking for the first plumber in the phone book because your
Yeah.
basement's filling up, that's not the time.
Yeah. Well, I think about my mechanic, right? I've been to a lot of different mechanics over the years for my vehicles, and I have found a local mechanic who I trust implicitly, who I can
Mhm.
take my vehicle to because I don't know squat about vehicles.
Right.
That is not my expertise. I don't have the context. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the ability to do it myself. So
Mhm.
finding somebody in my personal life who can do that, I found somebody, I'm never letting them go.
Right.
Those same attributes, I'm looking for those attributes in people for my business who I
Mhm.
can bring in around marketing, because marketing is not my expertise.
Right.
So find like it's
Mhm.
finding those, it's not just finding someone.
Right.
It's finding someone who is reliable, who you can
Mhm.
trust. And
Mhm.
yes, it's a transactional relationship to begin with, but and it will continue to be a transactional relationship because they are a professional. They may be running their own business,
Mhm.
but you can still build a rapport and trust within that transactional nature.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, like, one of the things that we talk about when we work with nonprofits is make sure you have a really good auditor. Someone,
Yeah.
because, right? So someone that knows your organization, knows the ins and outs of it, someone that is going to be able to submit things on time, all the other kind of pieces like that too, right? So it's not necessarily just saying that, well, your network is only people that you know personally, and then it really is more about people that will actually help you achieve the things that you need to achieve. But like I say, it's finding someone that you can trust, finding someone that you respect the quality of their work, and finding someone that you can rely on. And like I said, the best time to do that is to do that before you need to. So if you want a homework from this episode, is ask your peers or your family or anyone that's kind of within your personal life, do you have someone that could fill in these roles for me, and do a bit of shopping around so that way you don't have to when you're in crisis mode.
Because the one thing you want to do after listening to a podcast is have homework.
That's right. All right, so the last one of the great that I want to talk about is what we call the butt kickers. Guess what they
Yeah.
do? So these are people who motivate us and challenge us to think beyond our situation. Sometimes we like the butt kickers, and sometimes we don't like the butt kickers.
It's somebody who's able to hold us accountable as
Yeah.
well.
Hmm.
Having that accountability partner, having that somebody, because that's the other piece with in leadership roles is sometimes it's hard to find somebody who will hold you to account
Yeah.
in a professional way. I mean, if you set expectations with your staff, I mean, I have staff who are more than happy to hold me accountable for things I've said. But that's different than having somebody in my life who understands what I'm trying to accomplish or is willing to give me that sometime. I mean, we all get into these cycles of stuff gets messy.
Right.
We all, and sometimes it's really hard to lift your head up above the muck
Hmm.
and realize that, especially when you've been immersed in conflict or immersed in stressful situations,
Hmm.
sometimes it weighs on our physical and mental and emotional health. And having somebody who can, I mean, for me, somebody who can kind of give me that little kick in the rear end to say, things aren't as bad as you are making them out to be,
Right.
or you need to get over yourself.
Mm.
And here's what you've said you're going to do. Here's and help kind of build that accountability
Mhm.
can be really effective.
Right. And the idea too is that it's someone that can give almost like a sober, independent perspective on your situation.
Yeah.
Right. There's value in it because you're right. Sometimes we get so lost into it. The other thing too, though, sometimes we get trapped in our own echo chamber. Right.
Hmm.
Because again, sometimes if we surround ourselves with people that are really supportive, or we have a lot of really great people in our geek squad that think it's a great idea, but we're just talking to we're already speaking to the converted. We end up thinking that there's more legs to an idea than we thought, or this is going to be easier
Yep.
than we thought. And having someone that can again pour some kind of like ice cold water on us when we think that we've got something really hot to work with. Now, you and I, what we do is we actually collect people that we call our red team.
Yeah.
So a red team is a term for it's a military term. I can't think of what the actual definition of it does, but how we use it is we use it as the people that will tear apart our idea or that will shatter our echo chamber. So when we have something that we're really excited about that we think has some real legs to it, the problem with you and I being on the same page a lot is that we often don't challenge the
We
other one.
feed off of each other and things can get out of control
Yeah,
fairly quickly.
really quickly. So we have people that are okay, so let's share this with members of our red team. And they can tell us why this stuff won't
Yeah.
work and tear apart the idea. But that's why a lot of our ideas get a lot of legs because when we have a good idea, we frame it out, then we pass it off to have it be completely annihilated. And then
Yeah.
what remains from that is how we build momentum, right? So there's a lot of value in someone that can again motivate you, challenge you to think beyond the situation, give you an alternative perspective, tear apart your ideas, not in a way that kicks you when you're down, but in a way that helps you be stronger. Like the idea of like a good editor doesn't go, yeah, this sounds great. A good editor, if you're writing a book, sends you back pages of red lines, red lines, red lines, because they see the value in what you're doing, but they want you to make it better. And that's what a good butt kicker does too.
Yeah.
So those four, so again, the Geek Squad, the tour guide, the butt kickers, and the professionals are four of the great. There's other ones, but we don't have time to get into those because I want to talk a little bit about some of the like
The dirty
the other stuff,
dozen.
some of the dirty dozen,
Yeah.
some of the people that rob us of our resilience and rob us of kind of our momentum and make us feel more isolated. So, because like one thing that's really important to know is that not everyone in your life will fill into, again, the different areas of the great, right? Some people in that you work with are going to end up being part of what, who you need to have resilience from, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, so let's just dig into those kind of quickly with the last little bit of the conversation. So one that we see all the time when we go into organizations. It's funny because we use these labels again between
We
our
haven't created all of these labels,
no,
obviously.
and we use these labels kind of as shorthand for ourselves when we're getting to know a team, trying to identify potential but also areas of risk and threat. So one of them is again someone that we didn't make up a lot of these, but the emotional vampires. These
Yep.
are people who believe that everyone else is responsible for making them feel better. They're the ones that drain the life force out of you, and it's often about their woes are kind of what they share with you and feed off your energy as in that way. And it can be a really, really difficult thing when you have these emotional vampires that are just making you as a leader kind of like feel like you got to kind of carry their burden as well.
Yeah, and this can be both from a personal and from a professional standpoint. There are people in our lives, in our workplaces, who are emotional vampires. If
Mm,
you are a manager, if you have worked with people, you've probably encountered an emotional vampire, right?
mm,
Somebody who just sucks the life out of the room.
mm.
And it's not that they are necessarily miserable people themselves. It's that they tend to have a negative worldview or a negative filter to how they see things. I guess it's just like an emotional black hole that
Well, we
sucks
kind of see this.
everything.
We kind of see this with people that come from a lot of like institutional trauma or institutional
Yeah.
betrayal. The weight that they kind of carry, or that because again, it's almost like they don't have the resilience in themselves, so they need to almost get that from everybody else. Is kind of how the emotional vampire kind of operates.
Yeah. Okay.
So the next one is called the mooch. Now, the mooch is someone that is on your side, someone that is right along with you, but their allyship with you is really dependent on what they want from you or what you can do for them. There's someone that's going to ride your coattails and someone that's going to like, feed off what you get and try to like, turn your win into their win.
Yeah. This can be kind of going back to what I said around you don't, with the great, you're not looking at building these relationships or these supports from a transactional nature necessarily, other than the professional, which has some of that ingrained in it. But the mooch often is transactional,
Hmm.
right? They're looking for what you can do for them.
Right.
And it is a very selfish way of framing things.
Hmm.
They could be somebody who, in other circumstances, could be part of your geek squad. They could be a cheerleader for you, somebody who could be encouraging, but there's always this underlying feeling or tension of what are they actually after, or
Right.
that they're doing this to get something out of it. It's not that everything has to be altruistic,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
transactional, I think, is still a good term for it.
Well, we see this a lot when someone is promoted, that one of their like work friends is really excited for them because they're thinking, think of all the special favors and perks
Yep.
that they're going to get by riding the coattails of you that got promoted. So there's some of that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So watch out for the mooch. All right. The next one is the negatron. This is someone that finds a way to transform a conversation or situation about struggles that you're having to be about them and about the problems that they're having. So they're that kind of like that big, making the almost like your, like your struggle is really them and their struggle, or is kind of like, again, like, or how what's affecting you is really affecting them. It's like, when you I have to deal with this really bad news and you're trying to talk to someone. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, your bad news is bad for me, and they're almost like really trying to like add on to that, which can be a really negative.
Or even when you're excited about something.
Mhm.
These are the people who are going to cut your legs out from under you because
Mhm.
they're going to find all of the negative reasons and they're going to focus on why you're not going to be successful in what you're doing or why this great idea that you've had is doomed to fail because they can only really see this negative worldview.
Yeah. All right, the next one are what we call should cutters.
Yeah.
And these are people who criticize you and tell you what you should have done. They're the experts after the fact. They're the retroactive armchair quarterbacks that could have seen that saw the whole picture and really saw where you messed up, but are really about that, like they're reflectively brilliant in the way that
Yeah.
they, yeah,
Yeah. And again, I mean, these are you can probably pick out many examples of this in your personal and professional life of people who you, how many times have I heard this even in my own life of, talking things through with people and, oh, well, you know what you should have done was, it's like, well, thanks. That's helpful now
Mm.
after I've already gone through this, right?
Yeah.
It is a very demoralizing, very irritating
Because I mean, like sometimes, like,
mentality.
especially when you're like an entrepreneur and you're trying to do something new and bold and or something different, you'll have people that are looking out for you to kind of say, you know what, be careful of this and trying to warn you. That's not necessarily what a should cutter is. Should cutter is someone that maybe didn't say anything while you were
Mm.
when they had the opportunity to, but once there was a misstep or a failure, they have all kinds of opinions of what you should
But
have.
what I would have done is this.
Yeah, yeah. So. And then the last one I want to talk about is what we call the one-upsman. And these are people who can only feel good about themselves by being better, having better stuff, or or standing on top of someone else is the only way that they can feel like they are worthy of it by, again, pushing other people down so that they can make it all about themselves.
Yeah. Oh, you've had a success. Well, coincidentally, I've had a greater success today.
Right. And the thing too is that the one-upsman, I feel, is what is occupying a lot of social media. That a lot of the influencers, a lot of the social medias, like seeing these executives that have had these incredible careers on LinkedIn or all these kind of cool things. A lot of that is just the one-upsmanship. Is that they're just trying to, again, if they saw someone on their network post something, so they need to post something else too, and that competitive piece really does live
Social
there.
media is not reality, people.
Yeah.
Yes, there are legitimate successes that we want to celebrate and people who are doing really cool stuff and they're sharing
Yeah.
that. But I mean, I'm so tired of the guru influencer culture.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's a lot of one-upsmanship. It's a lot of projecting authority and authenticity and
Yeah.
trying to be really trying to present something that they're not.
Right. And the thing that I see a lot is with should cutters and a one-upsman are usually people that we look to almost like as mentors.
Mm.
Someone that we want to, and they have success. We want to kind of try and recreate that success, and they end up being the ones that almost like tear down our resilience because they tell us all the things that we had done wrong and necessarily pointing us in the right direction, or their success was unique to like the time that they got it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you couldn't recreate that, but they feel lots of things about how to almost like make themselves feel better or
Oh my word. I've seen so many business coaches and authors and who have been, yes, wildly successful,
Mhm.
but largely because of timing more than strategy.
Right. Yes.
And
Timing
then,
and connections that they had that were unique to them
yeah.
and the situation.
And I mean, not taking away from being able to capitalize
Oh,
on
absolutely.
timing and opportunity, but thinking that because you were able to capitalize on very beneficial timing, that you can then turn around and start coaching other people on how to do it is very, anyways,
Yeah.
you end up, that's how you end up with people who just sell courses, and
Right.
I made $1 million in 10 days and you can too, and all
Yeah.
you need to do is buy my $199 course, and that's how I'm going to continue to make money, by selling my expertise and not doing anything ever again.
Right.
Not
Okay.
that I'm irritated or bitter.
Not at all. So again, I think that this conversation about again the why leaders feel isolated, why almost like the dirty dozen are kind of some of the people that make that isolation kind of feel that way. So again, the emotional vampires, the mooch, the negatron, the should cutters, the one-upsmen are sometimes the people that make it feel like maybe they were the ones that burned us when we were trying to reach out, or we tried to build this kind of network for ourselves, and we ran into these kinds of people, which ended up making it setting us back even further. But the idea of not relying on one or two people to play all these different roles in your sports system, about realizing that sometimes it's a matter of diversifying and having 7 or 8 different people that can play one or two roles can often be a more powerful way to build up this sense of this connected resilience. And I think that what I would put out to people today is to reflect on who you have in your life right now. And, so who's in your network? Who are the people that you kind of you engage with? Who are the people that you kind of, again, you can talk to, be your geek squad, or those that there are that you can build relationships with to help you kind of guide you through unfamiliar environments as being your tour guides?
Yeah.
Who are the professionals that you can rely on, and that now that you want to build connections with, so that way they're in place for when you need them? Or who are the butt kickers who are going to challenge you and make you feel, or sorry, and make you see beyond your current situation, and give you that sense of sober perspective? This is stuff that can really help us feel less isolated, and allow us to feel more resilient and more connected and more able to handle the chaotic world of work that's out there for everybody. So that does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.